Welcome, everyone, to Eternal Life Plan. My name is Christine Harrington, your host. In 1992, I died and had a near-death experience and met God, which eventually brought me back to the Catholic Church. You saw the Crusaders in the intro. We are the Crusaders and defenders of Pope Leo, the past popes, and for women. And today's broadcast is about it's Jesus, not the Exorcist. Why Father Ripperger's demon-obsessed ministry misses the point. Now, before we get started, I neglected to say this last night on the live stream. Dan Kavik's dad is in very critical condition. He's very sick. He is getting better, but would you all please pray for Dan Kavik's dad, who is in the hospital and is doing his best to recover? So I neglected to say that last night, but I'm asking for your prayers for Dan Kavik's dad. All right. Now, our sponsor for the month of March is John Leap's Evangelization. And let me tell you about our sponsor and what they're doing. So they are having a big event on March 20th, or you could pick March 21st, called Shielding the Children of God Conference, which will take place at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park, California. The conference will be offered in person and also live streamed if you don't want to go in person. And the live stream will be available for 2 months. This extraordinary gathering is headlined by Cardinal Ernest Simoni, the 97-year-old Albanian cardinal widely regarded as a living martyr of the church. Ordained in secret under Albania's brutal communist persecution, Cardinal Simoni endured nearly 28 years of imprisonment, forced labor, and torture for his unwavering fidelity to Christ in the obedience of the church. Now, he is going to be at the event in California, in San Francisco, California, on March 20th and 21st to speak with all of these other speakers that are on this brochure right now. The public registration to sign up is below. Nicole is our moderator, and she is on top of it and is running that ticker tape about public registration. It's only $99, everyone. So support our sponsor. Even if you can't go to the live stream, John Leap's Evangelization. All right. Thank you so much to our sponsor. So let's get right into the show. So the church already told him to stop. What do I mean by that? Let me start with something most people don't know, including apparently Father Chad Ripberger. The Catholic Church has an official exorcism rite. It's called the Roman Rituals. And it has been the church's authoritative guide for exorcists for over 400 years. The updated version issued in 1999 says this explicitly. The exorcist is not to engage in lengthy conversation with the demon. Questions are limited strictly to what is necessary for the liberation of the person, nothing more. That's not a suggestion. That's the official rite of the Catholic Church. Pope Francis said it plainly in 2013. In one of his first homilies as Pope, he said, quote, "When you speak to the devil, you lose," end of quote. He pointed out that Jesus never negotiated with Satan. He never had a conversation with Satan. He commanded Satan. Full stop. The Catechism CCC 2116 teaches that seeking hidden knowledge through demonic sources contradicts the honor and reverence we owe to God alone. Still have some of that lingering cold going on in my throat. And St. Thomas Aquinas, the very theologian Ripberger claims as his intellectual foundation, taught that demons are constitutionally incapable of telling truth freely. Their nature is to deceive. Now, anyone growing up in the Catholic faith, we all know this. Any knowledge obtained from them is tainted by that fundamental orientation towards falsehood. Yet, in Father Ripperger's interview on the Shawn Ryan Show, it's out time stamped 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 25 seconds. Ripberger alleges a demon saying, "Every time I use you, I say something you use against me," which is Ripberger implying the demon can't help but tell him the truth. Think about that. The Roman ritual says not to engage in conversation. St. Thomas Aquinas claims that demons can't tell the truth. Yet Ripberger believes he is so powerful that demons can't lie to him. So here's what we're actually dealing with. Listen to what Ripberger says on the Shawn Ryan Show at timestamp 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 34 seconds about information he extracted from demons in his exorcism sessions. Quote, "The demons have said this to us, not just to me, but to other exorcists. They'll actually say, yes, he mentioned this particular person and this particular person." End of quote. He's talking about getting names of people in the Vatican he claims are corrupt. Names extracted from demons in sessions and then taken public. The Roman rite says, ask only what is necessary to liberate the person. Getting a demonic roster of corrupt church officials is not liberation. Taking that information and broadcasting it to millions of people on the Shawn Ryan Show is not exorcism ministry. That is gossip. Demon gossip, as David L. Gray correctly calls it. Why do we need to hear demon gossip? This isn't a cheap shot. It's a theological diagnosis. The church told exorcists not to have these conversations with demons. Ripberger had them anyway, and then took what the demons told him on the road to conferences, to YouTube, to the Shawn Ryan Show, where millions of people who have never opened a catechism are about to hear it and believe it's authentic Catholic teaching. It is not. Demons are cast out by the power of Jesus Christ, not because they fear Father Ripperger. The exorcist is a vessel, Christ is the power. And the moment an exorcist starts centering himself as the one who has the inside line on what demons are saying about the world, he has lost the plot entirely, which is exactly what the thumbnail says on this video, the demon gossiper. Now, I want to bring in Mike Lewis, who wrote an article on Where Peter Is about this interview of Father Ripperger and Shawn Ryan. I'd like for you to welcome in Mike Lewis. Thank you, Mike.
Christine. Thank you for having me. Am I
Did I
coming
get
in clearly?
anything wrong?
No, I mean, I wasn't able to finish the entire episode, unfortunately. I wrote I wrote an article yesterday when I heard the previous evening that Father Ripperger was going to appear on this the Shawn Ryan Show, which I wasn't terribly familiar with, but when I looked it up and actually Dan told me, it's in the top 5, maybe top 3 podcasts in the entire country right now. So, sitting just below Joe Rogan and some of the other big names. So basically what it sounded like to me was Father Chad Ripberger, whose reach was huge even before this. He was on various podcasts that, had over 1 million views. This is going to greatly expand his reach, however. I just checked the numbers right now. It's at 200,000. And I know that his interview with Father Dan Rehill, another exorcist, who also has some questionable views, it had 3.6 million views, and that was over a year ago. And since then, the Shawn Ryan Show has catapulted itself to, the top 10. Before that, it was apparently a second tier podcast in terms of ratings. But these things, it's not like TV ratings or box office. It's kind of hard to monitor the exact numbers. But based on whatever data, however these different data companies are determining it, including Spotify's own records, it's number 3 in Spotify. So take the 3.6 million from YouTube that Father Rehill got, and then add whatever Spotify's audience is, and then iTunes. And unfortunately, as we've discussed before, and as I've been tracking for a long time, Father Ripperger is expanding his audience despite his problematic and very un-Catholic and very untraditional views.
Yes, and we're going to get into what those are, everyone. And I have watched Shawn Ryan for a very long time. I know all about him. And for the audience, in case you don't know who Shawn Ryan is, he is an ex-Navy SEAL, ex-military contractor. He was raised Catholic, but fell away from the Catholic Church, became an atheist. And then after he started his show, he had some spiritual experiences and began to delve into Christianity again. And I believe Father Rehill lives, or his parish is not that far from Shawn Ryan. And he has been to Father Rehill's a mass a couple of times. But Shawn sits on the fence. He doesn't know which way he's going to go, whether he'll just be a Christian or whether he'll end up being Catholic. He just kind of teeters on the fence. What worried me about Shawn Ryan is when he had Schneider on twice. And I went, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you're talking about Dr. Dan Schneider, who I guess is maybe an adjunct professor at Steubenville, but he's within the inner circle of Father Chad. So there's Kyle Clement, who's his direct assistant, and Dan Schneider, I guess, runs the Liber Christo Institute or is affiliated with that. He's supposedly an expert in the doctors of the church and in Catholic theology. Who knows? Somebody's expert is somebody else's crackpot. Based on what I've heard, in terms of sort of mainstream Catholic thought united with the universal church, just like Father Ripperger, his views are very idiosyncratic and, as I would personally argue, lean towards the heterodox and superstition. Unfortunately, that seems to be the way with Father Chad Ripperger. It's interesting because he puts himself forward as a traditionalist priest, and he began with the FSSP, and I believe his religious community, the Doloran Fathers, which is based out of the Archdiocese of Denver. And I believe they have 4 priests, but I last I checked, which was maybe 6 months ago, but they all follow the old rite of exorcism. So the 1999 one that you mentioned, I don't even think they look at that. And based on what Father Ripperger has said, 18 dioceses, at least in the U.S., they use the protocols that are developed by Dan Schneider and Father Ripperger. And on top of that, Father Ripperger gives talks at parishes around the country. He's a priest in good standing in his archdiocese, so technically it's not like a rogue priest like Vigano or Father Altman. Unfortunately, his bishop, Archbishop Samuel Aquila, has backs him, supports his work. The Archdiocese of Denver has a long history of hosting some problematic priests and religious orders that have tended towards extremism and superstition. Archbishop Aquila turned 75 in September, and a new bishop or new archbishop has been named for Denver. It's Bishop Golka of nearby Colorado Springs. And when I saw the name, I was a little bit alarmed, because I know that back in November, Father Ripperger and Bishop Golka spoke together at a men's conference in Colorado Springs. And then 2 years before that, they both attended a rosary rally. Now, obviously, maybe Bishop Golka doesn't know the whole story. This is a priest in good standing in his neighboring diocese, so why not speak alongside him? But hopefully, once he becomes archbishop, he will take a serious look at the clergy that serve under him. And I would put Father Ripperger right at the top of the list. There are a lot of problems there. For example, Father Dave Nix, who is the diocesan hermit, supposedly, he's a priest in good standing. I know that he's had some back and forth publicly with Archbishop Aquila, who I think has tried to get rid of him, but for whatever reason he can't. I don't know if the Vatican has stopped it. I don't know. Who knows what the reason is? But Father Nix is an open sedevacantist. Like, he doesn't believe that Leo or Francis were true popes. I mean, he's excommunicated himself by definition. He's good friends with Mel Gibson. He and a group of other priests we know took a trip to the Malibu area, to Agora Hills, to Mel Gibson's chapel that he built on his property for what they described as a supercharged retreat. Father Altman was one of the priests that was there. There are rumors, I can't confirm them, but they're something to do with the idea that these priests were quote unquote Novus Ordo priests who went to this sedevacantist chapel to either renew their vows or have conditional hands laid on them by a quote unquote valid bishop. Because of course these sedevacantists, like hardcore sedevacantists like Mel Gibson, don't even believe that the Vatican II Mass or the Vatican II, post-Vatican II rite of ordination is valid. So, if sometime occasionally a quote unquote Novus Ordo priest will defect from the church and will join one of these sedevacantist sects, and they will reordain, or they won't call it a reordination. They'll say, we are ordaining him for the first time, because they don't believe he was ever really a priest. And so, there's this, so that's going on in the Archdiocese of Denver, and there are other groups that I've heard about. It's not really worth, probably write an article between now and the installation of soon to be Archbishop Golka, but there are a lot of problems there, and one of them is Father Ripperger, because he, even though he puts himself forward as traditional, as I've demonstrated, as I've written, And my most recent article, if you want to dig into it.
Yeah, let's get
Yeah,
into your most recent article, Mike, and I've got some questions for you, and I know you
sure.
based it on the clips that Shawn Ryan had posted. He always does a couple clips of his interview to kind of promote the guest, and then to get you interested in watching the full episode. So he put out 2 clips with Father Ripperger this week. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things I know that concerns you is this, because you describe Ripberger's concept of generational curses as a fabricated tradition. Can you
Yes.
walk us through the history of where that idea actually came from and why it matters that he presents it as ancient Catholic teaching, not current Catholic teaching?
Yeah. So Father Ripperger and Dan Schneider, I think, by extension, um, talk frequently about generational curses and generational spirits. Um, this is an idea. Um, Curses are about what they sound like in movies and in fairy tales, or about voodoo. The witch puts the curse on somebody, and they have a sore arm, because they put a curse on their arm, and then or you gotten sick to their stomach, or some malady has affected them, and it's not cured until a deliverance prayer is prayed, and the curse
Mhm.
is broken. This is, I mean, as I mentioned, voodoo. This type of belief is not part of anything that the fathers have written. It's not part of um, our tradition in any of our magisterial documents. I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of metaphysical things, a lot of things in, in the unknown that maybe we don't know about, but these are not part of Catholic revelation, and they're certainly not part of any formal liturgical rite of the Catholic Church. And like you were saying, that the rite of exorcism is part of the Catholic liturgical tradition. We have obviously the rite of Mass, we have the rite of penance, we have the rite of baptism, we have the rite of consecration of widows. We have these prescribed rites in the church, and none of them cover this idea that a curse, there's no right to break curses. Yes, we have exorcisms, which are to overcome evil and to purify people, but baptism itself is an exorcism.
Yeah.
It cleans you. Um, and he also talks about this thing called generational spirits, which, if I understand correctly, and there are a lot of theologians who have criticized this because it has become um, prominent in the Catholic Church, um, in certain Catholic communities. There was a there was an Anglican missionary who went to Africa. In Africa, obviously, animism is the native religion, which is, there are spirits in trees, there, the ancestor spirits, there's spirits everywhere, and that, basically through some form of syncretism, that spirituality got mixed into Pentecostal charismatic um, spirituality, and then it came into the Catholic Church through the charismatic movement somehow. And actually, this doesn't really appear in his mental health book, which I think came out around 2012 or 2013. Um, Somehow Father Chad Ripperger picked up this um, idea, this concept, and has integrated it into his entire program. So he talks about these generational spirits regularly. The sort of thing that he'll say is, if you had an ancestor who was a Freemason and you haven't done deliverance prayers, you have a Freemasonic curse in your bloodline. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I know for just a fact that my great grandfather, who was not Catholic, he was Baptist. He was a member of the Freemasons. I have had other non-Catholic Protestant ancestors who maybe were Freemasons. But, both of my parents, my mom was born and raised Catholic, baptized. My dad became Catholic as a young adult before he married my mom. The two of them made a profession of faith to the Catholic Church. They were confirmed into the Catholic Church. Both of them were baptized. My dad was never a Freemason, so that doesn't apply. The idea that I am still bound through some kind of curse that my great-grandfather brought on to us without even realizing it, because he wasn't Catholic and it wasn't banned. This just doesn't really have a place in the Catholic Church. When you make a false oath, that oath has no meaning. Just like when they say it's not an oath at all. Just like if you break an unjust law, you aren't breaking a law because there is no law. It's the same idea. I remember, for example, Saint Bartolomeo Longo. He was recently canonized a saint, an Italian saint, and a mystic, and did a lot for the poor. Apparently his writings are what led to the luminous mysteries. He was an Italian, but just one story that stuck with me. So he had a Dominican spiritual director after he converted, and he was very troubled because he had been a satanic high priest who had done black masses. And he had been to confession, he had converted, he had done all the things that you need to do to get right with God, but he still felt this lingering presence. And he talked to his spiritual director, like, what do I need to do to rid myself of that? And what his spiritual director told him, which has stuck with me to this day. I think, I may have heard it on Catholic Answers Radio 20 years ago. His spiritual director said, what you did there was false. It wasn't true. It doesn't exist. There's nothing to it. You're not bound by it anymore. Yes, obviously, psychological scars. We talk about cycles of violence or cycles of abuse, cycles of trauma that happen in families. And it's because of the environment that's created. If we're abused, we might perpetuate some of that onto the next generation. Sin does have lasting effects, but it doesn't mean that demons are going to be passed down from one person to their children or to the people that they come in contact with. And obviously, but like my article kind of points out, he talks about this stuff with such confidence. Like,
yes.
This is like it just rolls off his tongue, like he doesn't even have to think about it. But there are a lot of bishops' conferences and a lot of even exorcists, theologians, who have said this doesn't have any place in the Catholic tradition. Well, if you remember the man,
let me hold you up there, because didn't Father Peter Joseph issue a public challenge to Ripberger, name the church fathers who taught about generational spirits? Did Ripberger ever respond?
So there was a video that Father Chad Ripperger did in response to my first article about him, which brought up generational spirits. And I did mention what Father Peter Joseph had written in another article. And basically he said that and one of the quotes I used was that there's no foundation for this in the Catholic tradition. He wrote that he hasn't seen a single saint, a single father of the church, a single doctor of the church, a single pope ever bring up this concept. And then I reached out to Father Joseph. So just some background on Father Joseph. He is a priest of the Archdiocese of Sydney in Australia. He taught at seminary. He was the censor laboris, which is sort of the theologian who reads books on behalf of the bishop to determine whether they're orthodox or not, so that the bishop can approve it and give it an imprimatur. Okay, he performed this role under Cardinal George Pell. So we're not talking about a modernist bishop who is, some loosey-goosey theologian. This is a solid guy by any conservative Catholic situation. But obviously he's concerned, but he had written one article about Father Chad Ripperger's deliverance book, and he wrote another article about 15 years before that, without even referring to Father Chad Ripperger, about this generational spirits thing. And so I asked him for permission to reprint these articles on Where Peter Is. And sort of asked him for a little bit more background. And then, yes, he issued a challenge that said, I challenge Father Chad Ripberger to come up to name a single doctor, a single saint that has said this. Father Ripperger did do a video response to that video, and Ryan Grant was the person who interviewed him, and Ryan Grant asked Father Ripperger, well, which fathers is it? Where is it in the tradition? Because Ripperger's saying, oh, well, no one's read all of the fathers. These are things that were just kind of like people don't remember, but it was. And he said, well, can you name any of them specifically? And Father Ripperger said that Dan Schneider was writing a book about this, and it would be out soon, and that he'll provide a link to it. I think the book finally came out a couple of months ago. I don't know if it contains any actual quotes supporting this idea. Father Ripperger certainly wasn't able to name any of these fathers off the top of his head, which
so basically he didn't have much of a response.
No, if it's something this ingrained in your spirituality, something this ingrained in your ministry, something this ingrained in the stuff you talk about all the time to public audiences, and you can't even cite where it appears in the tradition. And the fact is, it's not there. This is a pagan idea that was imported through Protestantism, through the charismatic movement. And if you know anything about traditionalists, they're not huge fans of the charismatic movement. And he's presenting this as traditional Catholic teaching of the fathers. And because he says it with such confidence, and because he has these people with PhDs who support these ideas, these viewers, these hundreds of thousands, millions of people who listen to his talks, who watch these podcasts, are just going to take him at his word.
I used to be that person. I watched every freaking video he ever put out. I was one of those people. And where I parted ways with him, and I'm paraphrasing here, he alluded to it in the Shawn Ryan interview. He had said that demons don't lie to him because they know better. And I'm like, what? You're saying that you're that powerful and only Jesus is powerful? You're just the vessel. You're not, none of the, driving out demons didn't occur because of you. It would occur because of Jesus. Why does it take him so long to drive out demons? Now, I know what he has said in the past. It's because of all the evil in the world is why he can't do it really quick. Well, Jesus didn't have conversations with demons. He just commanded them to leave the person and they were gone. Okay. Now, I want to shift to, I know there are multiple bishop conferences, including Spain, who have condemned these ideas of Ripberger. Why do you think the church hasn't been more forceful in addressing Ripberger specifically? I mean, I know you believe that it's because Aquila is on his way to retiring, and the new bishop hasn't had enough time to settle in. So, do you think that's basically it?
Well, I think that there's more to it than that. First of all, Father Chad Ripperger left the FSSP at a certain point. He was based out in Nebraska, and he was invited into the Diocese of Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was in the early 2010s, I'm going to say around 2012. The bishop there was Bishop Slattery, another one of these bishops who had a reputation for inviting in some interesting characters. Another one of the characters that he invited was Sister Miriam of Israel's Hope, who is she's another, I think she's in Tyler now. She was invited by Strickland, but they got a new bishop who, as far as I can tell, seems to be pretty conservative. He was I think he was the chaplain at Texas A&M's Newman Center, which I think is the sort of, the gold standard for Catholic campus ministries on, at a state school. His predecessor was also made a bishop, Bishop Sis. He's somewhere in Texas. But the new bishop of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was Bishop David Conderla, and when he showed up, he asked 3 groups to leave. I remember this story, and I remember there was an outcry. I think it may have been the first time I ever heard of Father Chad Ripperger. But then the word kind of got out. Don't make a big fuss. Father Ripperger's working something out. So he's asked to leave by Bishop Conderla, but he was able to work out a transfer to the Archdiocese of Denver. Now, this is called excardination and incardination. If you take in a new priest, they become incardinated in your diocese. The only way that that's possible is if the priest of the old diocese and the priest of the new diocese agree. So if the person's saying, I'm willing to let this person go to you, and the other person says, the other bishop says, I'm willing to take him, they can come in. I do know that much of this has been brought to Archbishop Aquila's attention. A lot of this has happened under Archbishop Aquila's watch. I know that ultimately, despite whatever discussions have gone on in back rooms, that Father Chad Ripperger has been affirmed and has been given sort of he's been cleared for all intents and purposes to continue ministry. I know that the disturbing things that Father Ripperger has said about, especially about bipolar disorder.
Yeah, let's get into that, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I'd like to pivot to the mental health and everyone. I have a therapist that's coming on next Thursday who has a lot to say about all of this. She works with real patients, and she has her opinion about the abuse that's going on in the trad community, trad wives that are being abused. And we're going to talk about that next Thursday. She will be on. But Father Ripberger claims he's gotten every bipolar patient who came to him completely off their medication within 3 months. So as someone who's heard from people harmed possibly by his advice, what have you seen that claim actually do to real people?
Well, I got a message today, and obviously I'm not going to reveal
Who it
anybody's
is.
identity or
Yeah.
without their permission. And this is not the worst case or not the first person, but this person, this woman said she had a family member who had bipolar. They live in the Archdiocese of Denver. They went to one of Father Ripperger's talks years ago. And following that talk, their relative who had been diagnosed with bipolar stopped taking their medication. And this person said that she basically at that point, her relative cut her off, and they haven't spoken since. I know of other cases that have been, let's just say, I know that Father Ripperger has blood on his hands because of this. And I
Okay.
know that there are multiple people who have taken this advice, and it has been disastrous.
So you've
And
heard this
I
from more than
know,
one person.
yes, and I know
Okay.
that Archbishop Aquila knows. But that did not stop Father Chad Ripperger from giving a conference this year, so in January or February, to a group of 30 to 40 mental health professionals and talking to them about the relationship between the spiritual and mental health. This is a man who has no psychology degree. This is a man who has no psychiatry degree. He's written an 800-page book, and it mentions bipolar 2 or 3 times. And 2 of the times it has scare quotes around it. And in the other time, it's under a chapter that's demonic forces that are something like, demonic influence that's misdiagnosed as a mental illness. Okay. I don't know what it is about bipolar disorder, but Father Chad Ripperger doesn't believe, apparently, that it exists. And he said, bipolar disorder is, in fact, demonic obsession. That is an exact quote. And I have
Yes,
the audio.
and the therapist that's coming on next week has just lost her mind over this, because she says this is so harmful to say these things about bipolar, and he obviously, believes that it's a demonic situation, not a mental illness, and she will be coming on and explaining it from a therapist viewpoint, how harmful this is. And did you know, Mike, that YouTube removed one of his videos where he made this claim?
I actually think YouTube may not have removed it. He may have removed it when he
The
was feeling
research I got was that
oh,
YouTube flagged it and removed
okay.
it. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, because I know that a bunch of his, in the last year or so, I know that he has taken down a lot of the videos where he talks about mental health. But I also know that recently he has started talking about it again. He did a video with Matt Gaspers where he talked openly about, I think he was at the conference at the time. In this video, I saw about the first half with Shawn Ryan. He says that he talks about mental health. Maybe he's probably learned his lesson not to stay away from the bipolar claim. I don't know, but who knows what he certainly hasn't repented for it. He certainly hasn't been, the bishop hasn't issued a letter or anything saying that, Father Ripberger is prohibited from talking about this stuff. I think there have been some conversations behind the scenes, but nothing that's public. And believe me, it was a blow to my trust in the church. I mean, obviously, in the last 20 years, the institutional church has last however many years, the institutional church has failed us in a lot of ways. But Bishop Aquila basically giving Father Ripperger a go ahead. One of the things I think is Father Ripperger is actually very clever, because
Oh, yes.
he doesn't say that bipolar disorder is demonic possession, because for possession you need psychiatric evaluation, you need psychologist, you need medical, you need obsession doesn't need that. And so you become the object of a demonic obsession, and it's it manifests itself, I guess, in different ways, and that kind of thing. But he doesn't, and a lot of it has to do with his quote unquote protocols that you're supposed to follow, which include some very weird things about wake up times, and you have to pray this prayer at this time, and you have to play Gregorian chant on low 24 hours a day or something, 18 hours a day or something like that. Like this, I mean, it sounds traditional, like Gregorian chant. Okay, what? It's like people didn't play it in their house because they didn't have any recording. It's tying this stuff. It's, I mean, one thing, and I'm going to write about this soon, because I've been digging into the history of exorcism. These modern day exorcists, these celebrity exorcists, and a lot of them are just out there publicly saying, "I'm an exorcist," and talking about what the demons say and talking about what it looks like. And prior to the movie The Exorcist, there were exactly 2 exorcisms in the history of the United States that were known publicly. Okay. One of them was a woman I believe in Iowa in 1928, and it became a news story for various reasons. And the other one was the 1949 Roland Doe exorcism. That was an article in the Washington Post or something, but it's the one that that Peter Blatty saw, that he adapted into novel, The Exorcist. It was a boy in the true story, and it's just an article about that long, in in the Washington Post, and if you look it up, you can see it online. And the reason why he was so intrigued by it, because he had never really heard that this exorcism thing, he'd never heard about it. So the fact that it was actually an exorcism that appeared in the newspaper, okay, compare that. And a lot of that is under wraps. Like, we don't really know what happened at that exorcism. We have some of the history, but a lot of it has been filled in by people with good imaginations. Obviously, the novel padded it quite a bit, but a lot of the phenomena that we know about, or that that's been spread about that, is the work of somebody's imagination. So it's almost so. Before that, yes, there were exorcisms. Were very rare. If there was an exorcist in the diocese, only the bishop and maybe the vicar general and the referring priest, the people who needed to know, knew who that exorcist was. And if it happened, it wasn't on the public record. Then what happened was, because of that movie, because of the book, followed by the movie in 1973, and then Malachi Martin, who was a laicized priest who was kicked out of the Vatican, according to a former Vatican journalist for Time magazine. Malachi Martin has basically stolen his wife from him. And apparently Malachi Martin was sleeping around and kicked out of the Jesuits. He tells this story where he wasn't laicized. There's a document on EWTN.com. Colin Donovan, the theologian, requested from the Dicastery for Clergy, what is the status of Malachi Martin? He was laicized. He was kicked out of the priesthood. There's this popular legend that he was dispensed from a couple of vows or whatever. So
that's the comments that I've gotten on my
YouTube
so channel. Is
he claims that he had a secret
laicized
mission from Paul VI, and he was only dispensed from his vows as a Jesuit, but he still had his vow of so his vow of obedience, and all he had was, he still had chastity and poverty. I don't know what the story was, but he sort of, he had the gift of gab. He was very talented. And eventually he wrote a book called Hostage to the Devil in 1976. So 3 years after the movie. And this was a time where this is like right before the Satanic Panic. This is when Ed and Lorraine Warren were starting to become, they went from ghost hunters to demonologists. This idea that there were these secret satanic groups that were taking, that were meeting around the country. It could be just your neighborhood small town, and all of the and the sheriff and the doctor and the barber of the town are the head of the satanic coven or whatever. Like this type of story was popping up in the American consciousness. The daycares, where all the daycare providers were getting arrested and convicted for child abuse, based on supposedly recovered memories of the children. But it was a lot of suggestion. Almost all these people were eventually exonerated. It was, it was called a panic for a reason. But Malachi Martin,
I had that book. I read about the first 3 chapters, and I threw it away.
I mean,
it was so dark.
Oh yeah, but the thing is, he was riding on the coattails, and he got himself a bestseller.
Oh yeah.
And then he saw who was eating his stuff up. Who was it? It was traditionalist Catholics, and Catholics who were disappointed by the changes in Vatican II. So he made this whole career out of writing books that just catered to their fears.
Let me stop you there, because we're going to pivot with that theme on women, marriage, and abuse, which Father Ripberger is a large part involved in that movement, that traditional movement. He produced content with Timothy Gordon that was platformed alongside Candace Owens' platform. It was put on Candace Owens' platform. Why they never ever criticized Candace Owens is beyond me, because I'm told to shut up and get off the camera, get off the mic, because I'm a woman I should be sitting in a corner waiting for someone to tell me what to do. But they'll never go after Candace Owens. They'll never, ever talk about Candace Owens because she's supposed to be a traditional Catholic. Who knows? Who knows? Because of the way that she goes after Erica Kirk and the spin she puts on everything. So Father Ripberger made content for Timothy Gordon, What a Woman Is. This therapist that will be on next week, Mike, said she lost some brain cells watching that.
Oh yeah.
It was so poorly done. They rewrote history, and they did not position it as it is. They positioned it the way they want people to believe. So, what does that partnership tell us about who his audience is and who he's performing for? Because that's what I believe it is, and who's platforming him.
Well, it's obviously sensationalists,
Yeah.
people who make money off edutainment, infotainment, people who, I mean, there are a lot of theories about why people become conspiracy theorists, and it's, life is tough and it's hard to understand, and the things that go on in the world or the things that happen in your life, it's if you can't pin down the meaning of it, you feel, disjointed. So if you were to think, oh well, things are this way, the mass changed because the Satanists or the Freemasons took over the Vatican. Okay, well that explains it. It gives you a way to channel your anger. It gives you a way to focus your fears. And nowadays with all these study of algorithms and how to influence people and how to build audiences and all the money that goes into that kind of research, Candace Owens, obviously she's a master of it. Her husband was the founder of remember Parlay.
Yeah, Parlor. Yeah.
He was a little bit too early because that was sort of the first
Mhm.
anti-Twitter that came out at first, and it got shut down, I think, because of some of the things in it. But it's, he came from money, and just like Steve Bannon, they know how to exploit people to generate money, to generate traffic, to bend the market, and it's all very cynical. They're just, I mean, people,
Well, it's hypocritical, Mike.
yeah,
They trash me, but they prop Candace Owens up. Well, Candace Owens a woman too,
yeah,
and it's okay for her, but it's not okay for me because I don't support their abuse of women. And Father Ripberger teaches that women's resistance to male authority is rooted in the curse of Eve and can be demonic. He never talks about giving the woman free will.
yeah.
That is never talked about. Just be submissive to your husband, do what he says, don't do anything else. And it takes away free will. And as one of my astute viewers said, love is allowing free will.
Yeah.
And God gave us free will, but they push taking free will away from women based on this curse of Eve. So, what does that framing do to a woman who's trying to leave an abusive marriage?
I mean, it ladens them with guilt. There's no real argument there. I mean, he doesn't present it in a way. I mean, and we talked about it last time, but it's like the Protestants have this whole patriarchy thing, that they do too. You've seen Quiverful or Institute of Basic Life Principles. A lot of YouTube documentaries come out about these things after they implode, after they fall apart. It's like there's a history of this kind of thing there. But the thing that's different about Ripperger and Gordon's version is rather than saying, like the Protestants will say, well, the husband has to lay down his life for his wife. He has to die to himself and defend his family, women and children first. The man has to be, promise keeper. It was a burden that was put on the man. There's none of that in Ripperger's. Ripperger's either in one of the interviews he did about it or in that documentary, he said, even if the husband is an idiot, the wife still has to submit. That'll make her even more saintly. Why isn't he telling the husband not to be an idiot? Why
Well,
is he
not
telling?
only that, they never talk about the woman having the choice to
Oh yeah,
submit. There is no choice. They have no free will.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It even we have our own right. I mean, God gives us the choice of whether we're going to obey His laws or if we're going to
Yes.
sin. And this is one of the things that he. Okay, so because you have that free will, he never says, especially like when he talks about the quote unquote marital debt.
Yes.
Um, okay, so the wife, let's say she does say no, and he thinks a headache is a bad reason. Let's say she says no because I have a headache. He never says that the husband should respect her free will.
Well, and they
That she
never
said
talk
no.
about self-control
Well, that too.
either.
But like what I'm saying is, because he leaves it open, if the wife says no, he's not saying the husband has to respect her free will.
Yeah, right. No,
He's saying that this is wrong, and then he doesn't say how to handle the situation, which can obviously, I mean, connect the dots where that can lead in a
yes.
marriage. If you're not
Well,
giving the husband the instructions of how to respect his wife's free will, his wife's decision. I mean, it's horrifying.
that's why I get emails from trad wives telling me what should they do about their husbands that rape them.
I mean, it's
sad. It's an epidemic. It's an epidemic, and nobody wants to talk about it. And it really upsets me as a woman about that. But let me ask you this, Mike, because this is a scholarship question. Okay, a scholastic scholar reviewed Father Ripperger's his philosophy and called it scholastic utter nonsense.
Pseudo-scholastic utter nonsense.
Thank you. Pseudo-scholastic utter nonsense. And you have a quote describing him as a stupid person's idea of a smart person. How does someone with that level of credential gap maintain so much authority?
Well, he has a PhD in philosophy, and I think he might have a master's in that too. And he got that through seminary. I've heard some things about that, the quality of that particular seminary's education, whatever. So, 99% of us don't have PhDs. So we look at somebody's PhD and we think, oh, that guy must be brilliant. But I think the main thing about Father Chad is the way he carries himself with such confidence, and the fact that he doesn't ever show weakness. It's just, it's this sort of idea, it's sort of this influencer dynamic. I mean, I don't want to get political, but like you think of someone like Rush Limbaugh. When did the man ever show a lack of, every time he went to rehab, he kind of gave a talk about how, he screwed up, but, it's like he owned it. He's a man. And, when he comes back, he demands that he carries that air of confidence and authority. Even if he doesn't know what he's talking about, he can just sell
now,
it.
wait a minute, Mike. You're talking about Rush Limbaugh here.
I like Rush.
Hero.
May God, I'm just trying to bring up somebody that isn't around anymore. So I don't have to, I mean, I'm just trying to think of somebody with that level of know it, and I mean, some of the things he said were just sort of, he was in the world of politics though.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is understandable.
But Father Ripperger has even appeared alongside an anti-Semite.
Oh yeah. I mean, Tim Gordon's an anti-Semite.
Well, he's an anti-everything.
Yeah. Well,
and I think the guy's name is Robert Sunjus. Is it? Mike, you froze up.
Oh,
you froze up on me.
Oh, sorry.
The anti-Semite, I think, was Robert Sagenis.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that conference. So yeah, Robert Sagenis, he was a Catholic convert, and he first appeared in the book Surprised by Truth. Patrick Madrid. It was like 14 convert stories, I think. Marcus Grodi is in there, and Jimmy Aiken. The very first, it was like 14 Catholic converts, and his story was very generic. I think, I don't remember it specifically, but it was like, I was an evangelical and I found out this was true, and the Pope and read the church fathers, and just your standard EWTN style conversion story.
Yeah.
But then he became outspoken for borderline Holocaust denial, for really stressing that about the Jewish covenant and talking about blood libel. He was suppressed by his bishop. He got into a lot of trouble. He had talks that were canceled. And then I think around 2007 or 2008, he decided, I'm not going to talk about the Jews anymore. And he decided that his new mission in life was to promote geocentrism, which is the idea that the earth is at the fixed center of the universe and the sun revolves around it, and so does the rest of the universe. He's written a big fat book about it. I think it's called like Galileo Was Wrong. The idea, and the funny thing is, Father Chad, in that conference that he did, where he appeared alongside Sungenis, he promoted the idea of geocentrism. I mean, I put the quote in the article, and I mean,
and for everyone that's been popping on, the article is in the top of the chat. If you want to go ahead and copy that link, Nicole put it in the top of the chat.
Yeah. So it's just sort of, he seems to pick up on almost any conspiracy theory, any rumor, anything that sort of catches this, they call it red pill or black pilled wave of conspiracy theory. He, in one video, it's like, and I know people have different opinions or whatever, but it's like, he promoted the movie Plandemic, which, at the beginning of the COVID thing, which was a huge conspiracy theory. We've talked about the Harry Potter thing, where he thinks J.K. Rowling went to witch school and that the spells in the Harry Potter book are real and children have used them and have become possessed because of them. Which is,
J.K. Rowling has addressed all of that too.
Oh yeah.
And she has said that is not true at all.
Well, I mean, it's all just sort of rudimentary Latin, and the spells don't work. I mean,
right.
But it's like we're talking about curses. He believes in that spells and curses and hexes and all of these kinds of things actually do work. Like this is foundational to the way he sees the world. It's funny because I did a thread one time, and I don't know if it was very polite, but I compared L. Ron Hubbard to Father Chad Ripperger, because L. Ron Hubbard. So first of all, L. Ron Hubbard wrote a book called Dianetics, the modern science of mental health.
Do you know I read that book back in the, I think late 80s, early 90s, whenever. Oh my gosh, I remember that well.
But so he wrote a big fat book called The Science of Mental Health, and so did Father Chad Ripperger.
Yeah.
And then Father Chad Ripperger, he's always saying, we need to clear out those Freemasonic spirits that may be clinging on, or if you happen to be Native American, you might have some pagan spirits, or, name any kind of like person of color, you have some kind of pagan spirit in you from 400 years ago.
And Scientology believes that too.
Well, and so the term that Father Chad Ripperger says to get all the little tiny spirits out of you, clear them out. Well, what in Scientology, what is cleaning out the body thetans, all the little spirits that are messing up your mind and your psychology? What they want you to do is going clear. Yeah. It's the same terminology. And then it's like, I took it a step further, because it's like, so you look at the TV show King of Queens, Leah Remini was a famous Scientologist. Kevin James is a traditionalist Catholic, and he's actually friends with Father Ripperger. So it's like
Oh, yeah, I know
there's
that
like
too.
9 or 10 different things that it was like he's basically L. Ron Hubbard.
Well,
Um,
and Candace Owens, who's supposed to be a traditional Catholic with her husband, George Farmer, their best friend is a Scientologist.
oh wow, who's their best friend, or who do they?
I
Oh,
It
you don't
begins with
just
an M. His name begins with an M.
okay.
He's British. But yeah, he's a
Oh wow,
Scientologist and he advises Candace.
oh wow. I mean, it's it's
Small world.
well, these are how did I mean Scientology now because of the internet is having a lot of trouble recruiting people, but
Hmm.
it's a lot of the same persuasion techniques. It's a lot of the don't listen to Mike Lewis or Christine Harrington. They're stupid, they're idiots, they're enemies of the church,
Right.
and so people cancel us when, all I am trying to do, all my entire program, like this is my deal. It's people, there are well-meaning Catholics who want to be Orthodox Catholics. Like that's their intention. But instead of following the Pope, the church, the magisterium, their bishop, instead of following the catechism, like the actual real documents of the central church, they're following these influencers. And so, I mean, maybe it's a catch 22 because what I'm trying to say is don't listen to Vigano or Strickland or Ripberger or Taylor Marshall or Tim Gordon or Candace Owens. Listen to the Pope. Listen to your bishops. Listen. I mean, if you and the other thing is it's okay. You have free will. If you don't want to listen to the church, that's between you and God. If you want to reject this particular teaching of the church, that's between you and God. But the problem is you have people like Father Chad Ripperger who are effectively, intentionally or not, are lying to people about
Yes.
what the church really teaches. He
And I think that's
insists,
what
yeah,
bothers me the most, Mike,
like he
is
insists that generational spirits is
yeah.
traditional Catholicism. It is not. It's made up stuff that didn't enter the Catholic Church until the 1960s at the earliest. And it's probably more recent than that. Like the Protestants adopted it in the 1960s. Um,
Well, and the fact that he's not even using the Roman rites, he made up his own.
he may be using the Roman ritual for the actual exorcism, but he's written his own deliverance prayers that he uses
Yeah.
on top of that. Yeah. He
But I
uses the
meant the
old rite, not the current
1999.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 1999 revised. And of course, we know that the radical traditional movement, anything that's Vatican II is rejected, which means they reject whatever the bishops say. They don't
Oh
think they
yeah.
have to follow that. They reject any of the church teachings because they don't have to follow that because they reject Vatican II.
Yeah.
And this is part of the problem.
Oh yeah. Well, and he has it backwards too, because they have this. He's instilled this idea that if there's a new teaching that comes out, quote unquote new teaching, and it is not exactly the same as the old teaching, that means that the new teaching doesn't count, basically. Which is, I mean, if we believe in doctrinal development, that means that there can be something that appears to be a huge change. And I think Pedro Gabriel probably, well, he can articulate it much better than I can, but it's like the new development takes that tradition, and the Pope looks at the tradition, he talks to his advisors, they look at scripture, they look at the past teachings, they pray, they discern, and then out comes a quote unquote new teaching. It's, but what it is it is taking the gospel and re-delivering it for today. And there may be things that we didn't know about back then that, we start to realize, oh wait, this can be really, really bad. Or, the idea of, people always say, a lot of traditionalists disparage the idea in Dignitatis Humanae, which uh, is the very famous Vatican II document on religious liberty. And it's so Dignitatis Humanae, those words are human dignity. And in the very beginning, it says that we are becoming even more deeply aware of human dignity in the present age. And people are like, well, how could you possibly say that? The traditionalists are like, because we've got all these wars and we've got abortion and we got, all the, all the bad stuff, euthanasia, whatever. And it's like, he doesn't quite understand. They don't quite understand that the church is watching what's happening, and they're watching the way that people are treating other human beings like they have no dignity. Throwaway culture, treating people like they're disposable, the culture of death. And the church is becoming more and more aware that, wait a minute, we need to stand up for the sanctity of human life, for the dignity of every person. And if you look at our teachings on something like abortion or something like euthanasia, they've become so much more richly developed in the last 30 or 40 years, or even teachings on peace or the death penalty. It's like, we're thinking about these things in terms of every single person is made in the image and likeness of God, and nobody, not even themselves, can take that away. Like, God made us in his image and he loves us no matter what. And so how do we treat others based on what we are starting to really think about? Well,
let me stop you there.
Yeah.
So, Pope Leo came out, of course, asking for peace, pray for peace, promoting peace. He's made quite a few statements. He's never called out Trump. He's never called out the United States. He has called out to stop the wars, to end the persecution, the all of that.
Yes.
And of course, the traditionalists lost their minds. The secular media lost their minds too over his statement. And I said on a post to Eric Metaxas, do you know who he is?
Metaxas,
yeah. And calling out the Pope. And I said, Eric, I'm Catholic. He is my Pope. What do you expect him to say? Kill them all?
Yeah. Well,
let's be serious here. What do you want him to say? Go in, Trump, and drop all the bombs. Good grief. Wouldn't you want the Pope of the world trying to promote peace, not bombs? And I know I part ways with a lot of people on this, and that's fine. Nicole doesn't agree with me, and that's fine. I can actually disagree with people and still have them as friends.
If you can sort of remember that they have human dignity in your relationship, you can, if both of you are on the same page about that, then you can maintain that kind of relationship.
That's right. And I, for one, believe that Trump made the right move going into Iran. Now, that's a political view of mine. Then there's the religious view of mine, the Catholic view of mine. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mike?
Yeah. Well,
so I think that everybody tries to put it all together. And if you criticize Trump, then, and the traditional movement, the radicalized trads, will absolutely call you out because you're not MAGA. I've never been MAGA, but I voted for Trump twice.
Yeah.
But I've never been MAGA. But I want my Pope to support world peace. I don't want my Pope to go bomb him.
Yeah. Well, and that's, to use an even more clear-cut example, and I follow the situation more closely with Ukraine, Russia. To me, it's clear-cut. Russia decided to invade a country, a sovereign nation, and they're much more powerful. It was an invasion. It was unjust. It shouldn't have happened. It was wrong. Russia was in the wrong by doing this. And people were criticizing Pope Francis because he would talk about wanting an end to the violence. He would talk about the Russians. Now, the Russians, I've heard they've lost close to 1 million soldiers in this war, sending them to Ukraine. And a lot of them are poor people that are conscripted into the war, made as soldiers. Like, they didn't want to be there. In a sense, they're victims. And he calls Ukraine martyred Ukraine. Like, they definitely have been wronged.
Well, and
Like,
Ukraine was pulling people off the streets
yeah.
and making them into soldiers. I mean, they
But
both
and
have
so
done wrong.
but see, here's the thing. Let's say it's clear who's in the right and it's clear who's in the wrong in this war.
Yeah, I know.
If the war
Russia invaded
continues,
Ukraine.
if
Yeah.
Ukraine routs Russia and wins the war, let's say it takes them 6 months. Think about during that 6 months, how many people are killed, how many people lose their homes, how many families are separated. Like, when he says war is hell and war is the worst thing in the world, it is, as long as it goes on, no matter who wins. If killing continues, it's hell. And the best solution, now granted, this is a dream world, it doesn't always happen, but the best solution is for everyone to lay down their arms and to work it out diplomatically. Like, that's what the
That's the
Catholic
best
ideal
world.
would be. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then whoever's been wrong, there needs to be a lot of forgiveness, and there has to be a lot of tolerance, and really people have to show almost superhuman virtue in forgiveness. And it doesn't happen very often in society. I mean, things have repercussions we look at the reverberations of the evil of slavery and the Civil War in the United States. We're still feeling some of them today because of, the great sins that were committed. And it, we still bear some scars. Now, that's different from generational spirits, but it's just sort of this huge national psychological wound. But you look at other places, they're still sort of in the middle of it. But Rwanda, for example, how do you pick up the pieces and become a society again after something like that happened? I mean, it's like half the country lost their mind, or more than half.
Yeah.
And I've heard actually that there's a lot of tension, and people are worried that it'll spill over in the future. But it's like, healing and forgiveness. I know Immaculée she's sort of the famous Catholic Rwandan, and she lives in the U.S. now. She used to be on Father Groeschel a lot, but I can't remember her last name. But it's, she basically has a ministry of forgiveness and of peace, and that's really the way forward. Because if we continue to resent and to hate each other and not to see the image of God in each other, then violence and evil perpetuate. And honestly, I want to say the way that you've been treated by online traditionalists, the way that I try not to make it personal. I will criticize Father Ripperger's ideas. I decry the damage that he's causing to other people. But the physical, attacks, the ridicule, the bullying, the just sort of picking on you, the fact that they call people stupid. I mean, I know I'm not stupid. I may not be the smartest person in the world. I make a lot of mistakes. I try to own them when I do. But the fact that they think I'm a stupid person who doesn't have anything worth saying, it doesn't demonstrate any kind of Christian witness. It's basically,
and it doesn't show any kind of intellect either.
Well, but they're treating it like it's a sports team. It's like the trad Catholics, and and then you got the modernist Catholics, and you got the Muslims, and you got and everyone's their own sports team, and really you're just trying to beat the other one.
And this is the thing, Mike. I was a traditionalist.
Yeah.
I was in the movement, and then I woke up when God grabbed me by my hair of my head, and said, "My son Jesus will never leave his bride."
Yeah.
That's what God told me. And then I went, holy moly, why am I following Vegano? And it totally changed the way I viewed everything after that. And people have to just put their phones down and take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and be quiet and listen to God.
Yeah.
Turn off everything, be silent and listen to God. And my depression went away, because I was deeply depressed listening to Taylor Marshall and Vigano and John Henry Weston. And I almost left the church because I thought it's hopeless the way that they kept going on and on about Pope Francis. And that's the thing. They don't know me and they think they know me.
Yeah.
They don't know that road I went down. And it was not easy. I'll tell you what, they are attacking Katie McGrady for no reason other than she is a speaker at this conference in May. And they're attacking her because she's a woman speaker. And she has said nothing about this controversy. Nothing.
And the types of attacks are just disgraceful too. I mean, I'm a man and I get, they attack my appearance and, whatever. But
they do. Yeah.
They're even more ruthless to women. And so, I mean, I've kind of gotten a point, I put myself in the middle of stuff. So I've heard it all. But it's just, it really, really bothers me to see people tee off on, I mean, I'm not the biggest Katie McGrady fan in the world, but she does her thing. She's a faithful Catholic. She does her best. She's, people like her. Like she doesn't have a mean bone in her body that I know of. It's just, and she's a conservative Catholic too. It's not even like she's,
she is, and that's the thing. And today she did an Instagram. She did 3 Instagram reels about these attacks that she was getting today, and she said something that I thought was so good. And she said, I don't have time to be on social media all the time because I'm building here. I'm building my career here. I have a family I take care of. I have a husband. So all of these people that are saying all these horrible things about her, about you, about me, because we don't believe the same way they believe. What are they building? You're building where Peter is. I'm building eternal life plan. Katie is building her series radio show, right? We're all building. What are they doing? Nothing.
They're looking for the new thing to attack.
Everybody.
I mean, it's funny because people were saying like, well, what's where Peter is going to do, when Pope Francis died? They're so in love with Pope Francis that, they're just going to fold, and I think early on in when they were doing the whole "we're so back" and, Pope Leo is a secret trad because he wore a red thing on his shoulders when he came out on the balcony. They're like, hardest hit Mike Lewis. And I'm like, no, like, I know they're different men, it's funny because, well, so you're starting at ground zero with Pope Leo. Like your transition with Pope Francis was later in his papacy. So you're following him very closely. Yes. And I had I love Pope Benedict. I love JP too, but I was just sort of in that position where I was following and reading Pope Francis every single day. And so I felt this connection to him. So yeah, I miss him. There are things about him that it's interesting. There's some things that Pope Leo does that I like better, but for the most part, it's just sort of, I'm a blabbermouth, as you can tell. And Pope Francis was a blabbermouth. He would say, sometimes I thought they were the funniest things, and he'd get blasted for them by these humorless, trads who just didn't even, I remember one time he's like, if you say something bad about my mother, I will punch you, right? And his talks about family, and he's like, sometimes the plates get thrown around the kitchen because when you're mad at each other, but in the end you have to,
Mike, this is it. This is what it is. And I've done videos on this. It's a negative. It's a mindset that they have changed the way their brain is wired, where all they see is the negative.
Yeah.
They cannot see any good at all. All they see is the negative. And boy, did that really, I teach mindset training and sales training in my business. And a negative person can't change unless he or she makes a concerted effort every single day. And Mike, it could take years before they get out of that and rewire their brain.
Oh, yeah.
Years.
It's an
So when
ongoing
you're
process.
always looking for the negative, you're going to find the negative. And that's what they do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on a half hour or an hour and a half, and we need to take questions. So let's take a quick break. Then we'll be back and we'll take comments and questions. And Mike, before we do that, would you lead us in prayer right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're praying for Dan's father.
Dan's father. Mm-hmm.
And also I'd like to say my 17-year-old son, Peter, a week ago yesterday.
How's he doing?
Well, oh yeah, he had his appendix taken out. So
yeah,
he's fine. Fortunately, I mean, it was funny because it's like he came home from school and he had a pain in his lower right side. It's like, that's where your appendix is. And he's like, what's that? So it's like, all right, well, let's go to the ER. And ER was really busy. We got there at about 3 or 4 p.m. and we're there until about 5 a.m. And it was one of those things, like I'm on the phone with my wife. It was just me and him for that many hours. And she's like, well, does it still hurt? Maybe you can. And he's like, it's actually worse. And it's like, okay. So he was a trooper. He stuck it out, and then they finally did the ultrasound and finally got him, the doctor came in doctor came in and said it's appendicitis, but it hasn't ruptured. It is what it is. So it's like he had no symptoms except for the pain there, and caught it early and had the surgery, came home that day, and took a few days off school, and now he's, I don't know, it's a month before he can play rugby again. So anyway, sorry about that. But so let's pray for Peter.
That's fine. Let's pray
for Dan's dad.
Yeah.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All righty. Everyone, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get to your questions and comments. And our break is sponsored by our sponsor for the month, John Leap's Evangelization. Okay, Nicole, give us our first one. Denise, who is a member, thanks all the members only. I always enjoy listening to Mike Lewis. I do
Thank
too.
you, Denise.
Yeah.
I enjoy listening to your comments.
We don't get nice comments that often, do we, Mike? Salmi is also members only. I filed a formal complaint in the Archdiocese of Denver against Father Nix. I've never done that before in my life. Good for you.
Good for you. Yeah, pray for Archbishop Golka. I hope he does a good job. I don't know. I may have gone off on a tangent, but so when I heard he made those 2 appearances with Father Ripperger, I was concerned. I have talked to other people who say that, he's very pastoral, that he's down to earth guy, so I have hope. Hopefully maybe he didn't know him and then kind of got a sense of who he was. Maybe he doesn't start for another couple weeks. So maybe he's going to sit down and open up the personnel files and, his jaw's going to drop. Who knows? But just, pray for his discernment, pray for his wisdom. They've got a lot of problematic priests in Denver. And so he's going to have a tough job ahead of him. So yeah,
Okay.
Father Nix and Father Ripberger and others.
Well, we need to pray for Father Nix and Father Ripberger
That's true.
too, because
It would be great if they converted, you know?
oh yeah, it would be great if they converted. Okay. Why is the Vatican so lax on addressing such a huge issue, especially given the celebrity nature? That's a good question.
I've had, I actually had a conversation with a Catholic journalist the other day who writes a lot about, he wants to write a lot about these issues. He works for a Catholic publication, and he pitches articles about some of the more problematic figures. But it's funny because on the Catholic, even on the Catholic left, you'd think that they'd want to like totally blast people like Ripperger, but there's sort of an elitism. Like it's remember back in the 1970s, there was the New York writer who said something like, "How did Richard Nixon win the election? I don't know a single person who voted for him." And so they're hanging out. They're these sort of elitist Catholics who are kind of hanging out in these progressive Catholic circles. They're going to peace and justice events. It's, they've sort of separated their entire church experience, a lot of them, from these, from just sort of the normal suburban parish where this stuff is becoming big. A lot of times they don't know how deep it goes. Like if a priest, there could be a priest who's like, who holds some of the most crazy beliefs, but they could actually be a nice and normal guy who seems balanced. And so the bishop might just think, oh, well, he doesn't seem that bad. He doesn't seem like, because they're thinking of Father Altman, who's like, spitting fire as he's talking, or that, or Father Pavone, or some of these like, very outspoken people with these firebrand personalities. But the problem is when you're talking about an ideology, that in the olden days, in the 1980s, seminary class would have the one weirdo who would wear the funny hats and talk about demons all the time, and and they were like, oh, we'll throw him in a parish for a couple of months and he'll straighten out. Like that was the old wisdom. But now it's not a personality thing; it is an ideology.
It is yeah.
Young,
you're right, Mike.
Like the most young, good-looking, charismatic guy in your seminary could be a huge fan of Father Chad Ripperger. And that's something, the bishops are a different generation. They don't quite understand that this dynamic, this ideology is taking hold. And so I think they're slowly catching up. Now, when it comes to the Vatican, U.S. church is 6% of the global church. They think we're crazy over there. A lot of them do. I mean, I've been told that Pope Francis was actually really, really concerned about the U.S. church, and I've heard that Pope Leo is too.
Somebody put in one of my comments that the U.S. Catholics are ruining the church. I can't say I disagree. I can't say I disagree at all.
We have the money.
Here's something I want to bring to your attention. Let me go to my bookmarks here. New York Post today. Okay. Gen Z men think women should obey them, study says.
Wow.
Yeah. Think about that one.
I mean, I got married in 2005, and it's hard to imagine it was 20 years ago, but it's like I was in the conservative Catholic circles. We got married by, a very Orthodox young priest. And this kind of rhetoric that you're hearing, like that just wasn't part of our experience. It was all theology of the body, JP2, mutual submission, and Father Ripperger saying mutual submission is absurd. I don't know what happened. Like a lot of people in my generation that were, it's like we're still married. A lot of our friends, a lot of our peers, it's like, they have 5, 6, 7 kids, Orthodox, Humanae Vitae Catholics, and but it's like and I don't, I feel like an old fogey, but it's like it's like the Gen Z, somehow these ideologies have seeped in that just, I can't, I mean, it's hard for me to understand, but I understand that it is a serious problem.
It is.
And so
Okay.
all I can do is try to expose it, and hopefully the people who understand it better or who can do something about it can do it.
All right, Nicole. Tony, have you talked to other exorcists about this topic? I understand you say it has no place in the Catholic Church, but there are a number of exorcists who believe those things.
Yes, directly and indirectly. After I wrote my article, several exorcists did reach out to me and thank me for the article and say they appreciated it. My very first article about Father Ripperger. I've heard from numerous bishops. Bishops are the exorcists of their dioceses officially, and they delegate exorcists under them. And plenty of theologians. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Father Ripperger has a following. He's very popular. He trains exorcists. He writes books. The people who follow him write books. Now, I'm not a fan of any celebrity exorcist, frankly. Like, I think that it should be an 85-year-old priest who has seen everything and is completely secret and is going to keep it confidential and has walked the walk and lived the hard knocks. And I shouldn't know who any exorcists are. But even but exorcists like Father Carlos Martins, I know, has criticized Father Chad Ripberger for the talking to demons thing. And they have a big rivalry. Like, it played out in public after Father Martins got in trouble. Now, I don't endorse him either for other reasons that would take 3 more episodes to talk about. But like, when you rank them, Ripperger's the worst. And so, and Carlos Martins is absolutely right about that. The Spanish exorcist, I didn't talk to him directly. The Mexican exorcist, he's the head theologian of the Archdiocese of Mexico City. I've talked to plenty of bishops with, plenty of bishops that in the area of, spiritual theology. But yeah, and actually an exorcist from a diocese in Australia reached out to me personally and thanked me for it. 85 years old. The older guys, they see what's going on with the younger guys, and they're not happy about it. They think that it's something new. They recognize that this celebrity exorcist thing is something new.
Well, this is the thing, though, Mike. Father Ripberger is selling a fear economy.
Oh yeah,
it's all based on fear, and instead of speaking of Jesus and love and following Jesus, all he talks about is demons. Yeah. There's no balance there at all. I mean, now I can go all the way back to when, his speeches were being taped, and he would bring in some Bible teaching, but it was all about the spiritual realm and angels, and none of it was based in scripture. And some of the stuff I looked up, and I can't tell you guys off the top of my head. I'm going back 8 years here. And I would look this stuff up, and I'm going, wait a minute. Did I misunderstand this? Because that doesn't seem right. So, okay, Nicole, next question. Father Ripberger said, St. Teresa, hi, St. Teresa. Father Ripberger has said, under the command of Jesus, the demons must tell the truth, not under his power.
I mean, I'm not an expert in exorcism. This sounds like exorcism lore. I don't know that this is written anywhere in the catechism. Talking to demons doesn't, is ill-advised. Ripperger,
well, it goes back to what Pope Francis said. Jesus did not converse with the demons. He commanded them out. And he didn't ask them questions. He didn't have conversations with them.
And the words of the rite are all about, I command you to do this. I command you to do that. the things that they command, like say your name, but it's not, he gets on he's sort of like, oh yeah, I was exercising Beelzebub one time. Like he knows them, like they're his friends. And, I believe that exorcism is real. I don't
I do
believe that.
too.
I believe possession is real. The church teaches that it's a possibility, but I don't trust Father Ripberger's judgment when it comes to these things, because first of all, if he thinks that every single case of bipolar disorder is demonic obsession, he's wrong.
Yes,
And
he is.
and so when he is assigning things to demons, he could just be talking to a mentally ill person who thinks that they're possessed by a demon because Father Ripperger has bought into it. So
That's
even
why
if,
I can't wait to get
yeah,
this therapist on next week,
yeah,
Mike, to delve into this, because she is very upset about what Father Chad Ripberger has said. She's very upset about what Timothy Gordon did in that
yeah,
a horrible documentary, what a woman is. And I can't wait till she comes on to explain this to all of you all, so that you have a clear understanding of Father Ripberger is not a psychologist. He is not a psychiatrist. And this is
yeah.
dangerous territory, as she has told me. And you have said the same thing. Okay, next question. The celebrity exorcist is a ploy of the evil one to learn about God and how you should live, not directly from God, but through his sworn adversary. One cannot learn of God from one who hates him.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, well, I definitely think it is honestly, so many people have talked to me who were once under Ripperger's spell, or who knew someone who was under, and I use the word spell metaphorically because I don't think it's it's a curse, but one thing that they've commented is the darkness, and I have listened to hundreds of hours of this man talk. And the odd thing is, he's supposed to be this holy priest who's liberating from darkness. But what I hear when I hear him, and this is a feeling, you can't always trust it, but it's like, I just get this sense of darkness from him, just
Well, even
this
in that
despair.
documentary where What a Woman Is, it was very gothic
Oh yeah.
looking when they were interviewing him, and the things he was saying. It was creepy, everyone. I don't know if you saw it or not.
I
It
think they
was creepy.
think they live in a movie or something, with some horror movie or some fantasy novel or something like that. It's it certainly is entertaining to a lot of people. But and if it and one of those things like, oh, is it true? Is that really a ghost? That stuff titillates, and it captures our imagination, but it's not
Well,
the
that's
faith.
why I wanted you on, because you have direct contact with people who have talked to you about some of the things that Father Ripberger has said and done that has harmed them,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even
And you
today.
have talked to bishops and priests who agree with you on your
Yeah.
opinion on your articles, correct?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
righty. Let's go to the next question, Nicole. Jane Stark. Hi, Jane. Very enlightening. So much of what is said by certain people on YouTube that is confusing or misleading or incorrect and harmful to unsuspecting listeners has to do with money and power.
Well, I
Well,
mean, they're making a lot
we
more
won't
money than
argue
you
with
or
you
I are.
there.
So,
Okay, next one. Nicole. Social media happened and gave a platform to it and a cult of personality. That is so true.
the
That is so
algorithm
true.
is fed by conflict and controversy. So yeah.
Rapunzel says, my husband, get this, was an SSPX seminarian, and he would have never, ever think that way at all. He's an old school, or was an old school trad.
Yeah, and she's a friend of mine, actually. And a
Oh,
contributor to
okay.
where Peter is. Hi, Rapunzel. I don't know if you want your name outed. Uh, but yeah, no, and it's interesting because my article that I published yesterday got some traction and actually got some good feedback from traditionalists, like people who really have studied the Catholic tradition, recognize that this stuff that he's talking about it's entertainment. It's
Yes.
he's an entertainer. It's superstition. It's not rooted in. You go back to 1925 or 1874, whatever year in the past, you are not going to find anything that remotely resembles what Father Ripperger stands for. It is a modern ideology. And as much as he wants to decry Vatican II, as much as traditionalists want to bash, the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and modernism, this is a form of modernism. Like,
It is a form of modernism.
this is not Catholic spirituality. This is not Catholic history. This is not Catholic tradition. It's a new type of movement that would not have appeared if not for that exorcism movie in 1973, and if not for people just being disgruntled and needing answers.
Well, and you know what, Mike, that's a good point, because in that movie, The Exorcist, oh, I remember that well. I remember that well, and I half hid my eyes when I saw the movie. I think I was in high school, or maybe I was newly married. I can't remember which it was. But that movie scared the kajeebies out of me. And
Yeah.
and so you're right that that's when this whole thing about exorcism started to take hold.
People in movie theaters were freaking out, and all of a sudden, I mean, I don't want to be as cynical as Joseph Laycock, but he's a religious studies professor in Texas who's written about modern exorcism, and he's written a few books that I've linked to in some of my articles. But basically, he said that it was something, and he's the one who makes the point. There were only 2 exorcisms in America that anybody knew about until 1973. And then all of a sudden, all these people are saying that they're possessed. And the Catholic Church is like, yeah, we don't do so much of that. Or, have you checked with your psychiatry? Like, but that wasn't because of the Vatican II changes. It's because the church wasn't like thinking like that. But then the Pentecostals and the Charismatics and the Evangelicals were like, if the Catholics aren't going to give you an exorcism, we will. So there was a demand all of a sudden. And I mean, that's a cynical way to look at it, but it's sort of like, that's what kind of fueled it. And there are many people, including people with undiagnosed mental illness or diagnosed mental illness, who have convinced themselves that it is of a demonic nature. And even though it's possible, it's like you talk to an exorcist and it's like they, more than 99% of the time, they rule out possession, like way more than 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, with Father Ripperger, he's like, every time I hear of a case of diagnosed bipolar, I say, bring in an exorcist.
I know Father Lampert is our exorcist here in Indiana. He's a very low-keyed exorcist. He's not trying to get in front of a camera every hour of the day. Yeah. And he said, I went to one of his talks, and he said, or lectures, I should say, and he said that less than 1% of the cases that come before him are actually true possession. Yeah.
I mean,
okay, next question.
Yeah, it's sad because he's, so he was asked by your archbishop to minister publicly, whereas I don't know if the other ones have permission to do it or not, but they are. And one of it, and I think, if you have 1 or 2 guys who's operating closely with his bishop, and assuming the bishop is a sane guy, which yours is, it can be beneficial to have like 1 or 2 guys instead of, but instead you've got 1 guy, and then you got a bunch of people who are just writing whatever based on their experiences, and it's it's very concerning.
You have the Exorcist diaries, you've got the Exorcist this, the Exorcist that. Yeah. Okay, Nicole. Is he telling stories for the grift?
I mean, I don't know. I'm telling you, I'm giving you what he said. I'm telling you how popular he is. But I can't, I can't read his mind.
The truth is, Rapunzel, my opinion only, okay, is that people are so hooked and addicted to sensationalism that he gives them what they want. That's my personal opinion. Nicole, is there any more? Are we done? Okay. Looks like we are done. Well, we're almost at 2 hours, Mike. You have been very generous with your
Thank
time.
you. Yeah, I've been rambling on. I'm sorry.
No, we enjoy hearing you and listening to you because you have firsthand experience with the aftermath of Father Chad Ripperger.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what keeps me going, by the way. Like, people attack me, they call me all kinds. I have heard from, I have personal friends who have been damaged by him in life-altering, permanent ways. And so if people think that it's just me trying to, he lives in my head, no, his victims live in my heart. Like, that's really what carries me. Like, and that's why I said, Archbishop Aquila and will be probably my next article about Father Ripperger, unless something happens in the very near future. I'm going to write about that disappointment, because it is unbelievable to me. I mean, I don't want to. I mean, people bash bishops all the time, and that one. I mean, that was really like, I just don't understand. Like,
so let's finish with this though, because I forgot to bring this up. In the Shawn Ryan Show, Shawn always gives his guests a gift. Sometimes it's gummy bears, and sometimes it's a weapon. So what did he give Father Ripberger? He gave him a weapon.
Yeah.
And Father Ripberger said he carries, correct?
Yes.
So let me share with you all Canon Law 138.
Well, this is from the 1917 Code of Canon Law, so it was abrogated. But the new code came in 1983. But this is a very, very traditional teaching, going back to before guns. There's a teaching where clergy shall not carry arms except where there's just cause for fearing. And they say hunting should not even be indulged. But there were strict rules. And I remember my grandmother actually talking about the Cristeros, in Mexico in the 1920s. And the priests who picked up guns, even though they were defending Christians, they got in trouble. They got, laicized or suspended because they were disobeying church law. This is another thing. It's like this, somehow traditionalist priests have been absorbed into gun culture, but there's nothing traditional about a priest being a concealed carry person, and it's just another case of is this guy traditional or not? What tradition is he really embracing? I think it's something that he's put together in his own mind.
Well, and again, everyone, this is canon law, Canon 138. So I just wanted to bring that to y'all's attention.
But I do want to say it's not in effect anymore. But I wanted to make that clear. Like the new canon, and I did a short thread of it on it's, priests should avoid owning things that are, contradictory. Like they just changed it to something sort of like how, the Freemason verse was changed, but then that one was at least clarified after the fact in canon.
But he claims to be a traditionalist.
Exactly.
He claims to be a traditionalist, and he claims all of the old teachings of the church. So why would he disregard this one if he's really a traditionalist?
Yeah. And St. Thomas Aquinas said that it's improper for a priest to carry weapons or use weapons. I mean, there's a very long tradition. Priests should not be combatants. Should not.
So we're just being a cafeteria Catholic at this point.
Yeah.
All righty. Mike, again, thank you for being on. And you all know how we end. And I just want to say to you, thank you so much for watching, for supporting Mike. Go to the chat and copy that article. It's also in the show notes below in the video description of where you can, the link of Mike's article is in there as well. If you want to read it, I highly suggest you read it because Mike is such a good writer. You are such a good writer, Mike. And here's how we always end, as you know, eternal life is forever. Got a plan? And let's hope. I hope your plan is Jesus, because that's the only way. God bless you all. And I'll see you next week.
God bless.
And don't forget, Thursday night is a therapist. I have another guest scheduled for Monday. I can't announce it yet because we're trying to firm up the time. So it'll be a good one too if this comes through on Monday. All righty. God bless you all. Bye-bye.